Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to the talk. Today we're going to be talking about experimenting your way to better newsletters. I'm really excited to be here and looking forward to talking to you all about this. I appreciate I'm standing between you and your lunch, so I'm going to try to finish on time. If you have any questions, I'm very happy to take them at the end, or if you'd like to talk about them over lunch as well. So a little introduction to me. My name's Sim. I'm a dad to two beautiful kids. My older one is actually starting school in September, which is slightly terrifying, but really looking forward to that. I've been working in technology and artificial intelligence for over 15 years now. At the moment, I'm VP of product at Echobox, where I've been for the last 5 years. So what is Echobox? I'm sure many of you in the room already know of us, but for anybody who doesn't, Echobox helps publishers to automate their content distribution. We help publishers to save time and to increase their performance. We've been using AI for over 10 years and have 3 different solutions at the moment around social media, email, and web. We've got thousands of customers in over 100 different countries. So today we're going to talk a little bit about why you should run experiments, what an experiment actually is, how you can identify the right outcome to focus on. We'll work through an example together, and a few tips at the end, which I hope should lead you to. So why should we run experiments? I'm going to start off with a story. So Nehal runs newsletters for the Royal. I hope there's nobody here who actually works for an organisation, but it's just a test example. The goal that she's been given is to get younger readers. So they do some research, they look at younger readers, and they say, younger readers like tech. We're going to launch a newsletter for tech. They spend some money, they buy a speaker on that newsletter, they invest in different resources, all those types of things. They launch that shiny new newsletter. Everyone's really excited. But the newsletter doesn't. So the question is, why did that happen? What went wrong? The most important reason for experimentation is around reducing risk and reducing waste. You want to make sure that you are reducing the cost and things going wrong are minimized. So often people will criticize experimentation, saying, I don't have the time to run experiments. The question I would ask is, do you have the time to not run experiments? The second side of experimentation is about innovation. So it's about maximizing return on investment that you can get. Helping you identify new and innovative solutions that you maybe wouldn't have found if you'd taken a more traditional approach. It can lead to a better subscriber experience, higher open and click rates, and ultimately increased revenue. We're talking about advertising, upsell offers. So here's a quote from Dan Kaczynski. I'm sure every single person in this room knows who he is. So Dan says there's no one answer to growing your subscriber. It may take little bit and lots of experimentation over time to make this food. So I like this quote for a lot of different reasons. There's no one answer. There are many different ways, many different paths that you can take to get to your conclusion. That can be around growing your subscriber list, but it could be about other things. And the second thing in here is talking about little wins over time and lots of experiments. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So the old way of working, really thought about it in this way, was people would have an idea. They would say, great, I'm going to invest a ton of time and money, get this idea to market, and then sometimes it'll work, and sometimes it doesn't. Again, we don't really know why. The new way of working, you may have seen diagrams similar to this in the past. It's about building something, running tests, measuring, seeing how those things are performing, and then taking learnings away from that. And you can use those learnings to inform what you do next. You want to be running that cycle as quickly as possible. So experiments shouldn't last months, they should last days. And by using this approach, you can have lots of incremental wins, which will compound over time and give you an exponential set of results. So what is an experiment? Well, experimentation, when you say that term to people, they often say A/B testing. And A/B testing is a really great way to run an experiment, but it's not the only way to run experimentation. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Experimentation is really about a mindset of continuous learning. It's about helping you to make better decisions. And it's about validating those hypotheses in order to be able to deliver results. So just a quick aside about what is a hypothesis. It's a term which gets confused quite often. A hypothesis is something which comes from an assumption. Now, an assumption is a belief. It can be something that's based on your gut feeling. It could be from previous experiments you've run, or it could be from your previous experience. So a hypothesis takes an assumption and turns it into a testable statement. So in order to do that, we often use different structures. There are many out there that you can use. One that I particularly like says, we believe that this particular change for this particular group of people will have this particular impact. That's a really nice way to structure your assumption in a way that it becomes testable. But it's really important that you have clear success criteria. So an example could be, we believe that adding emojis at the start of the subject line for our sports campaign will increase open rates from 40 to 72%. And we'll use that data that you had originally to set that baseline, to set the target, and understand what it is to achieve. So in terms of types of experimentation, we have exploration and validation. Exploration experimentation is around asking open-ended questions. The classic example here is around interviews. So asking people questions and exploring the space to discover new problems that you maybe wouldn't have discovered previously. Validation experiments are about falsifying a hypothesis. So there's the classic A/B test that we spoke about earlier, but a couple of other ones that people maybe haven't heard of that I really like are a fake door test and a Wizard of Oz test. So a fake door test is where you say, you present an option to people, and they click through that option, maybe a call to action saying, join our community, something like that. They click through that option, and then they're taken to another place where it says, we're still working on this community, join our waitlist. But by clicking on that action, they've shown intent that they were interested in that particular topic. So it could be a really good way to get an early signal on a new idea. A Wizard of Oz test is where you have somebody interacting with a machine, with a computer, but actually all the work behind the scenes is being done by a human. So my favorite example of this is an app called ClassPass. Does anyone use ClassPass? Yeah, brilliant. So the idea with ClassPass is you can go into the app and you can book studio classes, fitness sessions, etc. Whenever you feel that you have time and a particular class is interesting to you. So the way they originally launched was with a very thin layer app where people could go and say, I'm interested in this particular class. And then the team would receive a request, they'd pick up the phone, they'd ring the studio, and say, hey, John wants to book a yoga class tomorrow in your studio. And the studio would say, yes, we have a slot. And they say, great, they book the slot, and then go back to the user and say, yes, your slot's been booked. From the user's perspective, they think that's just being done by a machine. But actually, it's being done by a human. And the beauty of that is it allows you to test something very quickly without having to go and build big infrastructure. So in terms of running a good experiment, there are lots of different steps to take into account. And we're going to work through a clear example after this as well, which I hope will make it a lot more tangible. So the first thing to think about is making sure that you have a clear outcome. What are you actually trying to achieve? You then want to think about what are the problems and the opportunities associated with that particular outcome. Once you've picked a particular problem that you're going to focus on, how could you solve that problem? There will be lots of different options. When you're thinking about opportunities and solutions, one of the best ways to come up with those is to work with your team, get a cross-functional group of people together, because everybody's going to have different ideas about what will work. So to bring all of those diverse opinions together, you need to really have a positive outcome. You then want to think about those assumptions. What are the things that are underpinning those solutions? And what is actually going to impact the way you want to think about it? And ideally, that is where you want to be running your tests. You don't want to be testing a solution, you want to be testing an assumption. Again, I'll come back to this in more detail in a minute. Hopefully it'll become more clear. Then you actually start to run your experiments. That's all about de-risking your assumptions. How can I increase my confidence in any one of these things being true or false? You'll then take some learnings away from those experiments, and then you repeat the whole thing all over again. Now that repeat is, I initially wanted to show this nice little flow going back and forth, but it got a little bit messy. And let me explain. When you have your learnings, you can have an experiment that succeeds or fails. Now, if that experiment succeeds, you may say, well, there are still more risky assumptions. I still need to run some more tests to increase my confidence. So you'll be going back to this step here and saying, let's pick another assumption and run another experiment. But you might also say, well, this particular assumption is shown it's not. We can't increase our confidence. We don't have the viability of running this particular thing. In which case you may say, I need to go back and choose a different solution. So this is an iterative process, but it's very adaptive in terms of where you'll be going back to and what you will be choosing to do next. So that first step there was around identifying an outcome. So I'm going to give a couple of examples here where I think it will hopefully make it easier for people to understand. So we've got here a funnel representing the journey that a leader may go through. This is just an example funnel. If you're building it for your own organizations, you need to think about what your journey looks like and make sure that you have the right steps. It might be more granular than this, it might be worse than this, you may skip steps, you may not. And in each one of these elements, you want to be thinking about how can I maximize the maximum number of people at the top, and how can I maximize the conversion of each level as well. That will lead to you delivering on the outcome that you're trying to achieve. So some examples of outcomes you may have in each step of this funnel could be some of the ones I've listed here. We're going to focus on a couple of them, so I'll start talking about these ones, and then we'll do that full work example. So starting to talk about them. So if your outcome or goal is to improve your deliverability, there's some very basic things you want to think about. Have you correctly configured your authentication? Are you using a highly credible sender? Are you pretending business spam? Are you seeing higher spam rates than you're expecting? You might also want to be thinking about your list hygiene. Are you tracking engagement over time? And then using that engagement information to inform the next action that you're going to take. So that could be sending re-engagement campaigns, it could be reducing the frequency at which you send that email, or it could be that you actually end up removing people from your list. Can't really read that, but I'll just talk through it. Morning Brew, I think, are really good at this. They do a fantastic job of ultimately taking people through to the end of that journey and actually removing them from the list. Initially, when they start to see a drop in engagement, they will start to re-engage people, they'll try different channels, they'll try different approaches, they'll send different emails in different formats. Then they start to reduce the frequency, and then ultimately they will remove you from the list if you're no longer engaging on them. Because that would help to improve on this. Another outcome could be, I want to increase my open. I'm sure you're very familiar with all of these different points, but I'll run through them very quickly. Are you sending at the right time, to the right day of the week, to the right time of day? Is your subject line, preview text, optimal? Are you thinking about the right words to use in those? Are they the right lengths? Are you using emojis? Are those two things working together? Research generally shows that the subject line is one of the biggest indicators of whether somebody is going to open the read or not. So it's really important to spend a lot of time to maximize the impact of that. You might also want to be thinking about who is the sender. I've got an example of basically as well. And finally, thinking about will personalization actually have an impact on performance. So this could be thinking about personalized timing. If you have somebody like Maria who likes to read a newsletter in the morning with her coffee, and you've got Lawrence in the evening on his commute home who likes to read the newsletter then, and you're trying to find the ideal time to send to both of you, you could send it at lunchtime. And that's not going to be ideal for either one of them. You're going to end up far down their inbox, or you're just going to miss the time at which they want to be. So thinking about how you can set the optimal time for the individual subscriber can have a massive impact on the open rate that you achieve. And our research has shown that the impact can be as high as 52%. Third outcome I'll quickly run through is about click rate. So are you including the right content in the newsletter? Is it in the right order? So the first article in a newsletter can get twice as much interaction as the second. So if you put the wrong articles in the wrong order, that can have a huge impact on whether or not people are going to click to it. What's your call to action? Are you using buttons? Are you using links? What color is it? What copy are you using? Where are you placing it? All of those considerations. And again, finally thinking about personalization, how you can potentially use personalization to increase your click rate. Our research has shown for click rates, personalized content selection, that can lead to up to 49% increase. So just thinking about that funnel and using it as a way to identify where to spend your time and attention, you want to be gathering data and comparing it to benchmarks. And that could be internal benchmarks that you have, other newsletters that you currently operate. It could be external benchmarks, thinking about what other people in the industry do. So I'm going to work through an example from top to bottom for that first outcome there, talking about growing the list. Again, hoping to make the experimentation process a little bit clearer. Just a reminder of the steps that we want to go through. That first step, picking the outcome. We're assuming that we've already done that. The outcome to achieve is this growth. So looking at opportunities. How might I grow my list? Well, there are lots of different options. We could be talking about getting new subscribers in, but we could also be talking about retaining an existing subscriber. It could be that you're getting a good number of people into your list, but then you're losing others people. And if we're talking about new subscribers, there's lots of different options. From the website, from social media, from other newsletters, or from events. There are many more. These are just giving things off. So let's assume that we've decided within this sort of opportunities, the area we want to focus in on is social media. So now we can start to think about solutions. And this is the kind of thing we would work in a workshop environment, brainstorm with our team to try and think of ideas. So one option could be paid lead ads. The adverts on Facebook and LinkedIn, which have the advert itself. You might look at organic campaigns, you might look at links in comments, you might look at links in share messages to drive that subscription. You might look at sending a message to new followers and say, hey, we also have a newsletter. For the purpose of the example, we'll talk about the comment. Go into that. So the next step is thinking about what are the assumptions behind it. And assumptions generally fall into four buckets. You have desirability. Do people actually want this? Feasibility. Is it going to be possible for us to build this? Is it technically possible? Is it legally possible? Is it possible to do it in a secure way? Viability. So what's the value to us as a business in doing this particular thing? And usability. Will people be able to find what they actually want? So I've written out some assumptions here. I'm not going to go through all of them in detail, but just looking at the usability ones as an example. We're thinking about, can people actually see the link in the comment? And then if they see that link, will they click on the link? And if they click on the link, can they go through to the subscription page? Will they actually subscribe? Those are kind of a few of the ideas you might have that you want to increase your volume. And we can map those assumptions on a map like this. This is just an example, but it gives you the different metrics you might think about. So how important is this particular assumption to whether or not this solution is going to work? And how certain or uncertain are we about this? So plotting the ideas on a grid like this gives you an understanding of where your riskiest assumptions are. That's this top quadrant up here. It's the things that are most important to you, but you're most uncertain. So if you're going to run experiments, that's where you want to focus your attention. For the example we're going to talk about this following is called click multiple link. So we've gone from the outcome that we're trying to achieve, we've narrowed down to a particular problem or opportunity we'd like to focus on. We've then said this is the solution we would like to test, and we've got some assumptions based on that particular solution. So we need to frame this as a hypothesis. The hypothesis that we could use, again, just for example, say, we believe that adding subscription links in the first column of shares on our football page for our football newsletter will increase weekly visits of football newsletter subscription page 10 times. It's very wordy, but hopefully it represents the type of design. And then the actual experiment that you're going to run, the test you're going to do, could be, well, rather than building out the technology to go and do this automatically for every single one of our posts, someone just does it manually for a week. Just sits there and every time you do a post on social, just add a link in the comment and just say, hey, subscribe to our newsletter around football. That's it. I'm sure we can word it to do that. So when we've run through that process, we've run an experiment, but we've actually focused everything down to a very specific area. And that allows you to maximize the impact that you're having over time. So off the back of the experiment, we can end up with one of two situations. Either we'll have success, in which case we de-risked an assumption, and we feel more confident that this solution is actually going to do what we want to do. Or you end up with a failure. But that's actually a good thing, because you've learned something. And you can take that away and say, well, if I had gone and built the entire thing, it would have cost me more time, it would have cost me more money. And I've saved all of that by not going and building. So repeating from here, as I mentioned earlier, think about honest thought assumptions that you feel not confident in, and you keep on repeating those you have. It's very much a judgment call that you have to make based on your own risk appetite and based on how risky you think each of these things. There's no single rule that you can use that says at this point it's completely proven. It is up to you to make that decision. So when you get confident, you're going to move that thing to production. You're going to launch it as a feature or as an asset reading a newsletter to everything. And you still want to use best practice when you're doing it. You want to be thinking about how can you run this in a lean way? How can you make sure you're consistently getting feedback from your subscribers? How can you run all of those different practices you see in normal development anyway? So a few quick tips to share with everybody. The first one is be careful of unintended consequences. So we're talking about the sender name here, which, in case anyone is not familiar, is that kind of thing that you see there where it says you've already run inbox, this is from this particular person. We ran some analysis trying to help publishers to find what could the optimal sender name be, or even is there an optimal sender name? And we ran this across multiple publishers, lots of different newsletters, tested things with emojis, we tested the format, and found something really interesting, which was it didn't really matter what the change was. Everyone's open rate, everyone's click rate went down. And the reason was not because of the change we made, but it was the fact that we even made a change. So you've got to be careful that certain changes can have negative impact. So it's important to test things very carefully. If you're interested in that white paper, it's a QR code here. I've got one at the end as well, which you can scan that. The second example tip I wanted to share was around taking learnings from other places and applying them again. And that could be taking a learning from your own newsletters, or it could be from taking a learning somewhere else. You'll often hear things like, the optimal number of links to have in a newsletter is 15. Not true. It doesn't necessarily apply to your space. The example that I had here was, someone shared this with me recently, and I thought it was really interesting. These are two really great books. Outliers talks about the concept of 10,000 hours of practice allows someone to become a master in a particular domain. And that was proved with a lot of research for violin players. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's true for neurosurgeons. So think about the context. And grit, similarly, was around selection for military professionals. That works really well in that circumstance, saying that perseverance is going to allow people to achieve the outcome they're trying to achieve, not necessarily just talent. But does that apply to the general population? If everyone had a base level of fitness, that's not necessarily true. So just remember that every newsletter has a different audience, a different set of content. So you need to think about how you can apply these. 2 more slides. So testing smaller niches. Groups of S wanted to increase their subscriptions, and they had a lot of really local content. So one thing that they started doing was launching more localized and niche applications, so targeting smaller regional areas. And that allowed them, by using automation to make sure that they could scale up in the right way, they were able to achieve a 400% increase in their subscriptions within 7 months. Yeah, there's a case study there if anybody's interested. I'll have this at the end so that you can see. And then finally, I thought this was a nice one to share. So testing new ideas. The Washington Post launched a newsletter, I can't remember exactly, 2 years ago now, when the Barbie movie came on. They had a 1-week series, it was a pop-up newsletter, and they ran it for that period of time. And they took the learnings from that particular experiment and said, if this works really well, we can now apply that to a larger audience. And they used it as the seed for their style of newsletter, which they wrote. From what I hear, that's been doing fantastic. So thank you very much for listening. I hope everyone found that useful. I'm very happy to take any questions afterwards, and I hope that you will start using more experimentation in your organization. So on behalf of the team, thank you very much.